Welcome to Footnotes, a behind-the-scenes look at what we value and why it matters here at Foothill Church in Glendora, California. My name's Ethan Bailey, one of your hosts, joined as always by Erika. Hello,
hey,
Erika.
Everyone. I feel like I'm not joined always, by the way.
I know, there was
about
like
that
2
recently.
episodes.
I don't think it's more than 2. I feel like I'm traveling a lot.
Yeah.
Side note. Anyway,
We're
as
live.
often as I can, I am
I'm
here.
just a liar. Joined today by Bryce in front of the camera today.
Bryce is always here.
Bryce also, you probably couldn't tell because it sounded so much like it, but Bryce did the theme music today with his beatbox. So we'll see if that makes the cut.
You probably won't.
Yeah,
it was probably awful.
Yeah,
The editor.
I enjoyed it though.
Okay, Bryce.
So
is gonna be like, that
Hopefully
didn't
this
make it.
audio sounds great with me over here, and like I'm really praying that we don't
Bryce
have
is
to,
monitoring the audio levels from
it's
afar.
like, can see. So far, so good. It looks great.
That is really cool, actually, to see in live time.
Yeah,
how we're sounding.
Wow.
There was a siren that just went by. How did that sound? Do you think we're okay?
I mean, it sounds the same.
I'm just kidding. We're gonna
here
go.
over
We'll
there.
be fine. Hey, let's get into this.
You won't
Bryce,
hear
who are you? What are you?
Who am I? What
Yeah,
am I?
tell us a bit about yourself, your family, and all that.
Yeah, so my name's Bryce, and I have been here at Foothill since about 2018. I think is when I consistently started coming. I'm a covenant partner, and it's me and my wife, Kalea. Hi, baby. And we have a 1-year-old, or soon-to-be 1-year-old, August Day Ronquillo. And we live in Glendora. And I serve in this capacity, running Footnotes with you guys, and that's been a lot of fun. I love doing media stuff. I mean, I went to school at APU for sports journalism, so doing this kind of stuff, running podcasts, is like something I really love to do. And so it was great to come on and serve with you guys here. And then I also serve Impact at Wednesday nights. As a high school boys leader, and that's a lot of fun. So it's kind of my involvement here.
Yeah,
with,
we get
Foothill.
to see a lot of Bryce between because we all both Eric and I also serve with Foothill students.
Yeah.
So
we're normally seeing each other like 2-3 times a week.
Yeah,
It's usually in a very condensed amount of time because we usually
Yeah.
film and record the podcast Thursday morning. So between Wednesday night and Thursday mornings, we're like, yes, you again.
Yeah. Yeah. So
But
thanks.
in a good way, not in like
Yeah, of course.
in a good way.
Yeah, thanks again, Bryce, just for all you do. Obviously, just here at Foothill, but even just specifically with Footnotes, it's a joy serving with you in this capacity. Thanks for recording us and editing us each episode.
Yeah.
You're killing it.
Appreciate it.
So hey, today we're talking about Jesus Revolution. Hopefully you've heard of this movie by now. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't. So today we're going to discuss a little bit about that movie, some of the takeaways we've got from it. There's kind of spoilers, but it's a real story, so it's kind of this weird. It's like
It's also been out for a long time. It just went on. I mean, it's not on video. You don't go on video anymore with movies.
Been
just able to
released to DVD
start.
and VHS, actually.
Yeah, if you still watch those, or just rent it on Apple TV we did.
As of April 11th, right?
If you want to buy a VHS,
Is streaming. So
I don't think you can with this one, but you could technically buy a VHS.
and then just record it over the
There it
Apple
is.
TV.
Yes.
it's a whole process
There's
if
a
you
way
need a
to do that.
VHS.
If you do that,
If you don't want
please let
spoilers,
us
go
know.
rent the movie, watch it, and then come back to this podcast.
Yeah. Or if you just want to watch and listen to us right now, I think you'll be safe. You'll be okay.
Yeah.
You'll still be able to
For
enjoy the
sure.
film.
yes, definitely.
So regardless, you make the decision. You're probably an adult that's listening. But hey, talking about Christian media today, Jesus Revolution, I feel like kind of helps set maybe a new standard. But talking about some old church film, have you guys enjoyed any stereotypically like cheesy Christian movies? I feel like Christian media has a stigma for that. So anything jump out to you that's like, you know what, guilty pleasure? I enjoyed Facing Giants.
Facing the Giants is really good.
So good.
I will stand by that
Yeah.
for anybody who will criticize
Yeah.
Facing the Giants.
That's-
I love the cheesiness.
Absolutely.
And even all the football scenes. Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
felt like it was done
It was
well.
good.
It's been a while
Yeah.
since I've watched it, but I felt like it was actually a well done movie.
Football movies, it's like Friday Night Lights, Facing the Giants right underneath.
Yeah. And then Remember the Titans is like way up here.
Oh,
But,
Remember the Titans is great too.
but
Ryan Gosling.
yeah. And I think if I had to pick a Christian movie that I enjoy a lot, I've seen a lot of them, and they're all very cheesy. And, guys, for all you creatives out there, we need better Christian media. And we're seeing that kind of with like The Chosen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This movie was done really well, which we'll get into that later, I think, talking about the production of it. But I think an underrated one for me was the Case for Christ movie. And that was based off the Lee Strobel book.
Okay.
And it's like an apologetics book. It's following this life of this guy who is an atheist, Lee Strobel, and he was a journalist, an investigative journalist, and he decided to follow the evidence for Jesus to try to disprove the resurrection. And this guy, like I said, it's a book, and he's a real person. He ends up, converting and becoming like a apologist for the faith. And so it's a book, but they turned it into a movie, and the movie was actually really good. And I don't feel like it got a lot of eyes on it, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I actually hadn't heard of that. So thanks, Bryce. I'm gonna watch that.
Yeah, Case for Christ.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
I'm not generally a movie watcher. This is something that in my recent life has really become a hot topic of like people will mention movies and I'm like, I haven't seen it. like A Walk to Remember. That seems like a movie I should have seen. I've never seen it. So especially when it comes to Christian movies, like people are naming them like, I really have not seen any.
Start with War Room.
Okay.
Just
kidding, don't
real
start
quick,
over.
just to attest to that.
Yeah.
Earlier, when we were just kind of talking, Erika asked, "Does Radio count as a Christian movie?"
Okay, so the reason I asked that because I was trying to think like what movies would I have seen, and I was thinking, and I don't know why this was the case, but there was a few times when I was in 6th grade in band, when our band teacher wouldn't be there, and we would watch one of two movies: Radio, or the Blue Man Group.
Oh, really?
This was a
That's
Christian
remarkable.
school. It was which is why I asked, okay, I know I've seen Radio. Is that a Christian movie? It must have been. I was at a Christian school, but I guess not. I guess not. So,
I feel like that's saying like, is the Da Vinci Code a Christian movie? Like,
Yeah.
so I guess I would say Charlie Brown Christmas is my favorite Christian movie.
Fair. Okay. Yeah, I like how we have opposites. I love Christian movies like Resurrection of Gavin Stone. I think that's his name. That's actually Dallas Jenkins, who does The Chosen
and
writes and directs The Chosen.
the wrestler,
Shawn Michaels.
Yeah, Shawn Michaels.
Yeah, the Heartbreak Kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He starred in that.
I grew up watching wrestling too, so I really enjoyed him in there. Other movies, Courageous, Flywheel. Those are all starring the same coach.
You watched
from
a lot of Christian.
You might as
movies.
well be
Some of these I
speaking a
didn't.
different language.
So
This
those
is
all
not a
star the
conversation I can
same
engage in.
actor that played the coach in Facing the Giants.
Sorry to cut you off, but I feel like that's one of the problems of like the Christian movies is
People
that
like
it's
me are funding
all,
them.
No, not that, but it's all the same actors. Like the plot is more or less
Yeah.
kind of the same.
I'm just saying though, Jonathan Rumi playing Jesus in The Chosen, now Lonnie Freeman in Jesus Revolution. He might be the new guy. We'll see. I hope not, but we'll see. Yeah. There's a whole list.
Everyone comment in the comments your favorite Christian movie.
Yeah.
And so
Actually,
we could create a
please do.
list
Candace
Please
Cameron
do.
and send it to
Anything with
Erika.
Candace Cameron. Kirk
And I will
Cameron.
have no idea who
I
you're talking about.
loved the Kirk Cameron Left Behind movie. I think there's a second one. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think they made multiple Left Behinds.
Hot take. I did not like God's Not Dead.
The first one was decent.
No, I didn't like it. I haven't seen
Everything
any of the
after
others.
that is
Yeah, I know
Cringe.
about that movie. Did not see it.
Yeah. Well,
it's all right. It's okay.
yeah. Enough about those movies. People are here to hear us talk about Jesus Revolution. Bryce, would you mind just kind of giving us a brief summary? Kind of what is, like, someone out there probably is like, what is actually Jesus Revolution, the movie about? What is it covering? What's the storyline here? Can you just hit on that a bit?
Yeah, sure. So it follows this main character, Greg, and he's a kind of disgruntled teen living in Southern California during the 70s. This is when there was the big hippie movement going on, protests against the Vietnam War. Society was just not in a good place. A lot of turmoil going on. during that time. And so, Greg lives with his mom in like a trailer park in Newport Beach and is just kind of struggling to figure out his kind of purpose in life. And it's really just kind of going to and fro from, different things. And he, meets this girl. It's always a girl, right? And they eventually, as they're, getting to know each other, they figure out about this Jesus movement that's going on. And it's like sweeping California, from San Francisco down to Southern California, where all these, hippies were essentially getting saved and giving their life to Christ. And then you meet, these other characters that were involved with that movement, one of them being Lonnie Frisbee, who was played by Jonathan Rumi. You guys might know him from playing Jesus in The Chosen. And then it also follows Chuck Smith, who at the time was a pastor at a church in Costa Mesa that had a dwindling congregation. And, he's kind of trying to figure things out. And then he meets this Lonnie Frisbee character, who's this hippie, kind of stands for everything he is against. And they kind of go on this mission together to bring Jesus to those who are broken and are without him. And so that's kind of the story. But I feel like it mostly follows Greg's story and also figuring himself out and going along with this as well. But that's kind of setting the scene there.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's cool is, so obviously if people didn't realize, this is based on a true story. And so it's cool even just hearing a little bit about how this, got made. And so Greg was actually approached by someone from a production company, from a movie studio.
This is Greg Laurie.
Yes.
The pastor of Harvest Church
yeah.
in Riverside.
Yep. Very large church out there. So this director and writer was just like, hey, I want to do a movie around this Jesus movement that happened in the 70s. It's like, I heard you were a big part of that. And so he got to chat with him, and that's ultimately what led to this. So it wasn't Greg Laurie wasn't producing a movie about himself. But it was someone who was approached, and so they kind of told the story based off of Greg and just other people throughout that. But it's also really neat. Lionsgate is kind of the parent production company, the parent studio. They're now partnered with a movie studio called Kingdom Story Company, which actually was created after the I Can Only Imagine movie. There's a guy that created that, and then so Lionsgate produced that movie, and then that ultimately led to like, hey, let's create this a little bit more niche Christian movie studio, production company. And so since then, Kingdom Story Company, they've done I Still Believe, the Jeremy Camp movie, and then American Underdog. That's the Kurt Warner football movie. With,
Zachary Levy, right?
Yeah, Shazam.
Yeah.
Shazam. Zachary Levy.
Yeah. So
he's just a solid guy.
He's
funny.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
He's a sweet dude.
Zachary Levy.
Yeah. He plays a really good Kurt Warner as well.
I need to see that one.
So it's pretty good. It's funny because I look at some of those other movies. There's still, I Can Only Imagine had Dennis Quaid. When you have some of these actors, they do carry some like real like levity within the performance and the acting, the quality. There still felt like there was still an element of, I don't want to say cheesiness, but just kind of like still feels like a Christian movie. And so that's where I feel like, now to get into Jesus Revolution, I feel like this didn't feel as much like a Christian movie. It felt a little bit more raw and real. So yeah, just from you guys watching it, and what was your guys' take from just the experience of it being a film and a movie, Christian content aside?
Yeah, I think one thing I really appreciate about movies in general is when it's not just like, unless you're really going for that like Disney, everything's like, kind of the general trajectory of the movie, like it's going to be great and then it's not going to be great and then there's going to be a resolution. You didn't really know what the resolution was going to be, unless of course you knew the full story. But there was just this kind of underlying tension through the whole movie, which really kept you engaged with what was happening. So whether it was tension with like, Chuck and Lonnie, or with Greg and his mom, or, between Greg and his girlfriend. Like there was just always these little tensions, which really reflected like, no, that's life. Like there's just always these tensions going on in our life. And this is a true life story.
Yeah.
And so it's not going to be very clean and, everything's fine and then it's not fine and then there's a resolution. So I really appreciated just the fact that like they really leaned into like, we're going to show that like there was a lot of wrestling, a lot of tension that happened throughout this really incredible movement that like from top down it looks incredible, but then when you get underneath the surface there's all of these really real things going on.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, I think one of the problems of Christian films in the past is I think they really limit their audience to like soccer moms and homeschool moms. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Very Hallmarky.
Very, yeah, and it's very much like we need a pound.
Side note,
in.
nothing wrong with Hallmark movies. If that's what you're looking for. Again, if you're looking for that like cliche, fun, happy-go-lucky, nothing wrong with that.
Right, yeah. It's very Hallmarky in the sense that they recycle actors. The storylines are more or less the same. And it's mostly like they pound the message of the gospel in there, and it feels very forced most of the time. Whereas I felt like with this movie, their focus was to tell a great story, but not to compromise on what was actually happening and that the gospel was being preached and people were getting saved.
Yeah.
Like we saw, and this is one of like Chuck Smith's, like what he's known for. He was a, verse by verse preacher. And so you see in these scenes, they have this great worship set, and then he comes out and he puts his Bible up in the air, and then everyone else is, all the hippies have their Bibles. And
it was cool seeing that.
Yeah. And he's like, all right, let's get into the Word of God now. This is God's Word. And so this movie didn't waver from that. It didn't like tell a different story, or it didn't water down all of the gospel message. But it wasn't like, it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like they were shoving it down your throat.
Yeah, I appreciated just the dark side of storytelling. Like they showed some just real stuff. Like they didn't shy away. They didn't allude to like, hey, drugs were taken. They showed people taking drugs. And so it puts you in those situations even more. And there's a whole scene of one of, through it's focused on Greg and his at the time girlfriend, Kathy, now wife. They were hanging out with some friends, and they're all just like hopped up on drugs. And one of their friends almost dies. And it's like, it's a heavy scene and it's scary, and and you see the impact that they had. And I think so much time it's just kind of maybe in other Christian films, there's just, hey, there's the redemption, but it's like, well, hey, where is that, like kind of that rock bottom and stuff like that. So I appreciated, you feel the weight. And then you get to even just see, fast forward to when Gray accepts Jesus and is baptized. It's just a really cool, even just powerful moment. So I don't think they shied away from those tensions, and they really leaned into the celebrations. I think it just made those good things that much better because you feel the weight of the negativity. So, and then just production wise, I just thought it was really good too. Yeah. I mean,
it's probably the best of all Christian films that I've seen.
Yeah, acting was great. Lighting was awesome. You felt like you were there. It felt very dynamic. Like some of those like rain scenes. I mean, it's just really good. Like
that was really good
quality stuff. It didn't feel like they were tight on a budget. And what's cool is that's Lionsgate funding the Kingdom Kingdom Story Company. And so it's not like in the past maybe some of these Christian movies had to do self fundraising, but no, now they have the backing of a full movie studio to do really good things. So it's exciting to see what else is even going to come in the pipeline from these other movies. I was looking on Wikipedia. There's they have a couple other movies like lined up in the next couple of years. I don't remember what, but it's exciting. It's I'm excited to see kind of what unfolds.
Yeah, I think what's cool about that too is, me and you watched the same interview with Greg Laurie on YouTube with the
Ruslan.
YouTuber, Ruslan KD. Shout out to Ruslan. He talks about how like how Lionsgate like recognized that there is a void in the market for Christian films. And so I think that's really cool, and it's like a testament. Like if you're out there producing good work as a Christian, you're being unapologetic about your faith, but you're still like doing amazing work in your field, like the world is going to recognize, because you know they want to make money. And then that gives the opportunity for you to, you know, get your movie out there. And I mean, I think when Jesus Revolution came out, it was like number 3 or number 2 on its charts. I mean, I don't know exactly, but there were some pretty, you know, highly anticipated films coming out that weekend, and it was beating some of them in the box office. And so I think this is really cool, and I hope we see more, you know, Christian films, more like we've seen with The Chosen. They're releasing episodes in theaters and beating out.
People are going to them.
Yeah. So I think this is a good thing. You know, I think if you're kind of skeptical about like, oh man, like if it's making all this money, is it really keeping the gospel message? Because no one would want to go see the gospel message because it's so offensive. But I'm not sure that's true, because people are going to see The Chosen. They're going to see Jesus Revolution, and they're putting their money into it. So I think that's all really neat.
Well, I think that's a fair point too of, and maybe this is just my jaded perspective, but I feel like when other Christian movies were being released in the theater before, it did kind of feel like I almost remember being in church and like our pastor saying like, you need to go watch this movie as a Christian because like other people need to know that this is like kind of almost like, I know it's a bad movie, but you need to go see it because it's a Christian movie and you're a Christian.
Fellow Christian.
Right,
exactly. Right. Whereas like this is a movie that like, I mean, if we'll talk about like context of those who were in that era, but like, this is history, American history. And so there are people who may not even have any context of like, go see this movie because you're a Christian, this is a Christian movie, who would be interested in the topic because they were either, you know, affected or had some sort of knowledge of this, you know, revolution, because they lived through it, or they had some family members, you know, who were connected to it. And so there's going to be an appeal. And the work stands for itself because it's fantastic work, not because it's a Christian movie, so you should go see it, you know? Yeah.
It's funny because even The Chosen, I think a lot of people hopped on it early. A lot of people have hopped on it late because of the same kind of reservation. Like the kind of even maybe natural pushback of like, it's a Christian production. Right. It's not gonna be that good. I don't want to, you know.
I mean, I'm one of those people.
Yeah,
for sure.
You're like, enjoying it now?
For sure. Yeah,
fantastic.
It's fantastic.
You're what, season 1
right now? Season 1, like episode 6. I'm really behind.
It's so hard to get through some of those episodes because you're just like bawling, crying through some of them, and you're like, wow, that was a lot.
That's not me, but maybe. At one point,
I won't put that on you.
Internally, though,
I'm very emotional internally. Maybe not.
We just never see it.
You never see it.
Yeah, you just don't. You don't. Your tear ducts don't produce water.
Correct. Yeah, they're actually broken.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's. Let's hear from each other a little bit more about some actual takeaways from this movie. There's a lot of themes. There's a lot that this is hitting on. What's something that you really like stood out to you thematically, and you even felt challenged by or encouraged by? Maybe even like a favorite part within the movie that kind of frames that.
Yeah, and I don't know that I've like fully thought this out, so just bear with me. But I just really loved, and it wasn't even something that was like even, a B story line of the film, but the relationship between Chuck and his wife, and even kind of recognizing like we can see the full story, we can see the beginning and the end, but like as they were in it, Chuck was really like, is this the right call? Yeah. There's even a scene where they're like sitting in the living room, and there's some tension that's happened with Lonnie, and he's talking with his wife, and he's like, he says something about like, why are the lies, like, why is this happening? And she says like, the lies, the truth is very quiet. The lies are going to be a lot louder than the truth. And to see like the perseverance that both of them had, and even to see at the beginning of the movie, the hesitation that his wife had as Chuck was kind of saying like, no, this is what we're going to do. And her being kind of uneasy and just persevering and supporting him regardless of her own feeling. And even as the movie progressed, like she, and there's a lot there, but even seeing like how she had to wrestle through, like there's a one scene where she takes food to, you know, this rented home where all of the hippies are living. And she's like, okay, like they're people, like
hyping herself up.
Yeah. Hyped herself up as she took food in, and to see, you know, even without dialogue, like her taking that step of faith, and stepping into a world that she was not comfortable in, but she knew that, you know, like what's happening here is greater than myself. And she even says that there's a part where Chuck and her name's
Kathy.
Greg's,
No.
Chuck's wife's name.
Oh, Kate.
They're standing behind this curtain as like in the tent. There's the band playing, and Chuck's kind of doubting, like, you know, they don't want to hear me, like they want to hear Lonnie, and Lonnie's gone at this point. And she's like, this has nothing to do with you. Like, you can feel the power of the Holy Spirit. Like, who are you to stand in the way of that? And to kind of see like almost her story play out in the background of what everything else that's going on. That was the part that really stuck out to me.
Yeah, I really like the dynamic between Chuck and his wife. And, you know, obviously the writing, there's creative liberty, so we don't know exactly what the conversations they had were, but I love the depiction of what you really want out of a marriage, but also for like a pastor to have, you know, the support and backbone of a wife that will, when needed, like, hey, like, I'm gonna remind you that, hey, you're being dumb. Here's some truth. And so I loved that just depiction, and just celebrating that, you know, a good healthy marriage that they had there.
Yeah, that was really cool to see on scene, and like her pulling the best out of Chuck in that moment. That's something I've heard, like, you know, if you have a good wife, it's someone who will pull the best out of you when you don't even realize that you have that. And so to see that in the movie depicted, I thought was super cool and super awesome. I think one of the themes that I really enjoyed seeing was kind of the theme of God using flawed and broken people to get his message out and to change lives, which, it's funny, I think there's a lot of doubt of like, oh, can revival really happen today? You know, is that something that, you know, which I think we're going to talk about revival a little bit later, but we see even throughout scriptures, the, you know, revivals, you know, of, you know, Israel going through, you know, massive sin and massive failure, slavery, but then being revived, and, you know, God using, you know, whether it's certain kings or certain prophets to then bring them out of their sin and, you know, back to right relationship with God. But then you see with some of these prophets and some of these kings who initially do good, they sometimes really mess up after, and, you know, sometimes die in sin. And it's crazy because even the Bible reading plan right now, we're going through 2nd Chronicles, and you see, you know, some of these kings that do that. And so back to like Jesus Revolution, you see these very flawed characters in Lonnie Frisbee, in Chuck Smith, in Greg Laurie, and even like Chuck's daughter and Greg's girlfriend, you know, then to be his wife later. But it's and if anybody knows like their history, like Lonnie Frisbee, and they didn't show this in the movie, but after he takes off from SoCal and goes to Florida, it comes out that he had some major moral failings.
Things got messy.
Yeah, like he was totally living a double life. Wow, he was partying on Saturdays, preaching on Sundays, which eventually, you know, he gets AIDS and eventually dies. And you know, Greg Laurie in interviews kind of, you know, upholds that Lonnie was repented of his sin, but still the consequence of, you know, living that double life, it cost him his life eventually in catching AIDS. But we see throughout the movie the tension between like Lonnie and Chuck start to build as the thing is going. And it's almost like, oh, like, is this just going to fall apart? Like without Lonnie there, it's just, you know, all of the, because he's the one who is, you know, he's going around prophesying over people. He is, you know, getting all the hippies in, they're hyped up. He's healing people. That we see a scene, and
Chuck starts to grow visibly like discomfortable to
so it's almost kind of like, okay, what's gonna happen now? And then there's that big speech that his wife gives him before he goes up and preaches. And I think that's a great reminder of how God can use, even in our flaws, to go and do amazing things. You know, and even in, you know, in Greg Laurie's life, because we see him as a teenager in this movie, but this guy goes and plants a church at 19 years old, and he is still a pastor today. No major moral failings, no scandals, but he has built something amazing, and I think that's just a testament to how God could, you know, do some amazing things through people.
Yeah,
that's great.
Definitely. Yeah, for me, I saw it. I've seen this twice. So in theaters, and then when we watched it all together, and I was actually really excited to get to this specific scene again. It's when Chuck and Lonnie are sitting at the table for the first time at Chuck's house.
Oh, man, that was so good.
I just love the fact it's at a table, and I think that's a good representation of, hey, conversations are had at a table. You know, it's in their home, and I just love that. But that's where we really are introduced to this kind of pivot in Chuck's kind of missional zeal, because Lonnie is, you know, they're having a question, and Chuck's asking, like, well, tell me about your people, like these hippies. And that's where Lonnie explains, like, hey, these people that you claim are, you know, mine, like my people. He said, like, they're looking for God too. They're looking for answers. It's just they're looking all the wrong places. And just beautiful dialogue that they're having. And then just at the end, Lonnie is just explaining, like, hey, you know, you say my people, well, my people are sheep without a shepherd. And so it's kind of like they're looking in the wrong places for things. And so that kind of just really, even for me personally, I'm like, oh, it's like, that was like a perspective shift of like, yeah, even just thinking about today, like, you know, mental health is a hot topic, where people are, you know, looking for, you know, the truth to like their, you know, identity as well. It's just all this stuff. And it's like, they're looking for the right thing. I mean, they're just not doing a good job at it, and looking in the wrong places, essentially. So it was kind of really eye-opening to that. And then, so in the movie, you see just Chuck. He just kind of gets up and walks away because he's just feeling the weight. And really, I think the conviction of how his church specifically, in his context, but I'm sure he feels it in the sense of other churches in general, have really neglected the pursuit of lost people. They're kind of just like feeding their own sheep, and not, you know, being a shepherd to those that are lost and stuff like that. So that was such a beautiful scene. I was really excited to kind of get to that, and I still felt the weight of it. Just is so good. Any other kind of moments or anything that stood out to you guys, that even just some small things? I really liked, on a funny note, the scene with the car. I think that's just it just highlights, like, this is a fun movie too. Like it's not just this heavy, you know, dramatic kind of thing. It's like there's really funny moments too. And so it just felt so funny, like them praying over the car and like being really specific, but also you're seeing the human side of, like, you know, God, be with the carburetor, which I was told was replaced recently, you know.
And then he goes, you know, like, funny. Okay, I'm kind of looking bad here.
So anything else just kind of jump out, even some small things?
I mean, I think, again, like the very, like, human reality of, like, Greg being like, I'm gonna marry this girl, I'm gonna go to her dad and, like, ask, and he's like without Greg even asking, he's like, if you think you're gonna marry my daughter, you're like, you are insane. And he's like, oh, never mind. And, you know, that causes, of course, a bunch of tension, but, like, just the very, like, real, like, familial relationships and like.
It's funny because they depict the dad as the villain at that point.
Oh, absolutely.
The dad was totally right though.
Oh yeah. It's like put yourself in those parents' shoes for
It's
1
like-
second. Like this rebellious daughter who's like, you know, for all they probably don't even recognize like the change that she's gone through. Like she's one moment like in a Janis Joplin concert and you know, doing drugs, and the next is like brings this guy home who was at that concert, and then you know
she's hanging around the same people. They're just
same
going
people.
to church.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
So
They're like, okay, we'll see, but
they deserve to be a little skeptical.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
as any parent should be.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely liked the relationship with Greg and his mom, and how that was kind of like sprinkled in along the way.
Yeah.
Which, spoiler alert, it's revealed that Greg, who was like searching for his dad the whole time and was like really upset at his dad because it was just him and his mom, so he had the assumption that, oh, my dad left us, and I think even his mom told him like, yeah, he left.
Yeah.
And then it's later revealed that like towards later in the movie, like she says, no, he didn't leave, we left. And so
and he wasn't even your real dad.
yeah, and it wasn't even his real dad. So now Greg, who was upset at his dad this whole time, then finds out he's not even his real dad.
And there's the whole thing of like the significance of his name, and it's like that he, you know, we changed your name, he adopted you.
Yeah.
So
I liked all that because then he has this identity like crisis.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't even know who I am anymore. He's questioning, you know, whether this is real.
Yeah.
And then it comes down to that scene with the journalist from Time magazine who was not a Christian, like telling him like, hey, what are you doing? Like, don't you see what's going on here? Like, don't you see how amazing this is? And he's like, I don't even know if I believe it, but you should stick around at this church. And I think that's so cool when you encounter secular people or skeptics who also have a reverence for like the good that religion does. And we should if you have those people in your life, you should continue to pray for them and talk to them.
Yeah. It felt like this movie as a whole, though, like really encompassed a lot of people's even stories and relatability. Like, I feel like anyone could watch this movie and feel like, oh yeah, I've felt that before. I've struggled with that.
Totally.
Or like I can think of the person that was like that who in my life, you know, like you were just talking about with the reporter, someone that's kind of like on the fringe of like, like you don't dislike this idea of faith.
You're just not fully bought in.
Yeah, you know. So it really is. There's a lot of layers, I think, to this that make it quite enjoyable and to unpack. One of the other small things I really enjoyed, kind of, I don't know if it was really intentional, but I shouted it out when he came on screen, the guy in the wheelchair.
Oh, yeah.
He's a vet. That's Goldberg from Mighty Ducks, who's also in the movie Heavyweights. I don't know if you're familiar. Yeah.
I'm familiar with Heavyweights because Katie Hensley is obsessed with that movie.
It's a good movie.
I've never seen it.
And so he plays the one of the goalies in the Mighty Ducks franchise back in the 90s. And so a few years ago, maybe like 5 years ago, there was like a picture and like a report, like, look at him now. Like he was like hopped up on drugs, super skinny, like looked like he aged a ton. Yeah. And it was like really sad. Like, oh man, like Goldberg, who was this kind of funny, quirky, pudgier kid, and then just see him so like old, frail looking, thin, like unhealthy. But then I think like after a year or two, it came out like, hey, he's clean, he's sober now, and so it's super cool. So I love seeing him in this movie.
Yeah.
Of like, and then even his like really minor character, just like even being healed and then serving, and so I don't know what his deal is. He might have just like, hey, this is a paying gig, so I'll do it, or maybe he has more of a faith connection. Right. I don't know where he's at with that, but I love that.
Pray for Goldberg, y'all.
Yeah, Sean Weiss. I looked up his name. Sean Weiss. Yeah. So, yeah. Speaking of, I mean, so this whole movie is around revival. I think culturally, revival is a buzzword. I think historically, it kind of always has been. I've seen like flyers like revival tonight at this. It's like, well, how are you calling? Revival
night, everyone.
Yeah. So I think sometimes, I mean, we've talked a little bit towards cynicism to even just Christian movies and media. I feel like as Christians, we can sometimes grow cynical to the idea of revival. And sort of rightfully so. I think there's some right to have some like safeguards up and not to just assume something so blindly. But this movie came out right around the same time that stuff in Asbury with their chapel just going for like over a week long or so. We've seen other things of like these worship things along the West Coast over here. How have you guys kind of honestly felt, and I don't know about engaged, but like even just how's your perspective been? Because honestly for me, when I first saw the Asbury stuff, I'm seeing it on social media, instant just skeptic, like just because social media, it's not really controlled. It's always really it could easily be fabricated. And then so it's just like, I don't know, is it really like revival is just thrown around so loosely? Is it really revival? And so I kind of actually struggled, even just seeing these other videos of people doing worship on the beach and just kind of like, I don't know, like, so I've had to actually kind of really challenge myself to fight that cynicism. How have you guys kind of handled that? Just right now, it just seems like this idea of revival is a buzzword, but it's also growing. There's this desire. It seems like it's all kind of building up in us. Yeah. How have you guys been kind of navigating that personally?
I think likewise. I think when I see stuff like that, I'm naturally skeptical. And I very much like to take a wait and see position when it comes to, revivals, because I feel like it could easily be hijacked by revivalism and people who, are just kind of bought into that, that idea of heavy worship and praying and speaking in tongues. Nothing wrong with all of those things, but when that becomes the main focus, I think you need to check your priorities a little bit. But what was cool about the Asbury stuff is as it was going on, it wasn't mega church pastors pulling up to preach. The mega church pastors were pulling up, but they were told they had to sit in the back with everyone else. And then you have just like a person on stage, for some of the time, like a single person just with acoustic guitar, just kind of playing. People are sitting in the pews praying with each other. It wasn't like a energetic, full band worship night the entire time, but you still saw the Spirit moving in amazing ways, and it continued. And they were even telling people, like, when they show up, like, hey, put your phones away. If you're going to be here and participate. And like, even like with, big pastors pulling up, they were like, okay, yeah, there's a seat all the way upstairs if you want to sit down, but we're not going to hand you a mic and say, go up and preach. This is our thing, and this is we're trying to preserve this move of the Spirit. And so I commend them for that. And I think that if that's what's going on, and you have a genuine move of the Spirit, and it doesn't need to be like big and flashy, then I say go for it. Rock out, do your thing. And I think if more of that was common, I mean, we're obviously pretty close to APU here, and I think we all went to APU, right? Yeah. I think we could all agree that place has been a bit spiritually dead for a while. I think we all felt it while we were there. I certainly did. And so to even hear like APU had their own like kind of revival night, inspired by Asbury, but hearing, from some of our, congregants that attend APU, like, no, it was a genuine move of the Spirit. People were confessing sin. People were getting prayed for. People were giving their life to Christ. I think that's great. And I say amen. And we got your guys' back. I just hope that those revival people get plugged into local churches. They get discipled. Because I think that's where you're going to see the most growth is from doing that. But if you're just there for the hype, I think that's a problem.
I think when I saw that, and I've seen things going forward on different college campuses or whatever it is, I think my first response is like, Lord, I pray that is genuine, that it's, you know, I think regardless of what it is, like, you know, even with the Jesus movement that happened, like there are going to be those who are there because they just want to say that they were there, you know, but there are going to be lives that are truly transformed. And I think that's, you know, the skeptic versus the optimist, like you can really focus on one or the other, but like the reality is like lives have been transformed and lives have been changed, and you know, people have been brought into the family of God through each one of those situations. So I think the thing that has stood out to me in each of those situations has been of course there's planning that goes into those things, but usually the way that it's been, you know, carried out is, you know, okay, our normal programming is done, and it's, you know, those who are not in leadership, it's, you know, the students who are like, we want this to continue on. There was an instance at Biola a few weeks ago where they had this sort of conference, and there was a chapel, and the chapel was over, and the students were like, okay, well, we're going to keep making it be like, we want to still be here, enjoying worship together, you know, fellowshipping with each other. And it ended up in baptisms. They just went to like a fountain on campus, and it's like students baptizing each other. And it's like, are you a believer in Jesus? Like professing faith? Yes. Okay, then I baptize you. Like, those are the things where, you know, sure, we can be like, oh, I'll keep my eye on it, like we'll see. And that's where, you know, I think like if you are a skeptic, like that's where we can be like, okay, then what are you doing? Like, how are we going to actively engage those people so that we can help them further in their faith? So it's not like this was this one time, like, you know, camp, mountaintop high, and then they come back down the mountain. They, you know, it's 2, 3, 4 weeks later, and they're like, okay, well, I don't really know what to do from here. So I guess that was it.
And I feel like that's what we see within the movie Jesus Revolution, and just the story of just the Calvary Chapel churches in general. Like they really actually did this whole idea of like multiplication and discipleship and just all that. And so, you know, you saw that growth and everything. You guys are all looking at my phone because it finally happened. Be Real went off. And so I'm going to stop and take my Be Real. Bryce, are you going to do your Be Real right now?
We have been waiting for this moment, many a podcasts, for Be Real to go off during... Do you not have your phone, Erika?
I don't have Be Real.
She doesn't have Be Real anymore.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Sorry to expose you on
That's
the
okay.
podcast like that.
How do I do this? How do I want to...
Yeah, you should have thought this through.
Yeah.
No offense.
I'm going to go with your phone like that. Okay, yeah. Beautiful.
All right. I'm gonna keep it. No retakes.
No retakes.
No retakes.
Okay.
Let me add a caption real quick. Recording.
I'll add the caption later.
Live. Right now.
I like what you were saying too earlier, Erika, as Ethan finishes that up about, and it makes me think of that verse that's like, wisdom will be proven right by her fruit.
Yeah.
And I think if all that was happening was these great worship nights and then that's it.
Yeah.
But like in Jesus Revolution, like they had these great worship nights where people were healed, where people were delivered. But then these people stayed in church and were going to Bible study and were getting involved and were serving. And then those people eventually got married and had kids. And I mean, I'm certainly a product of that movement in the sense that my parents got saved in a Calvary Chapel. Yeah. And we even see, you know, you were touching on it, that, you know, the churches and, you know, there was movement from that. And so we see at the end of the movie that Greg sent out to plant a church. Yeah. And so, you know, it's that wisdom will be proven right by her fruit. So this movement happened. It was great. But then there was fruit from it. People planted churches. People had families, raised their kids up in Christ. And we see in SoCal, particularly in like Orange County, still a big portion of people who identify as Christians and directly related to that movement. Like their grandmas and grandpas were hippies that got saved at that time. Yeah. So I find that super awesome.
Yeah, it was cool hearing. So your dad watched it with us, and so we were talking afterwards, and just even hearing him, he's like, yeah, it was still kind of growing and brewing even in the 80s, you know. And so it really, it was still felt kind of new. It sounds like. So yeah, I mean, you're a product. You and your saving faith are a product of what happened in those early 70s, late 60s, whatever. How was that watching this? I know you guys grew up going to Calvary Chapel churches or Calvary Chapel Church. What was that like for you, Bryce, watching really the Calvary Chapel we know today get created?
Yeah, it was really cool I love church history, and so this was a little bit of church history, even if it's a bit more modern, a bit more recent. And so to see the stories that I've heard told, whether from the pulpit or from people or, from my parents, to see it kind of brought to life, I thought was pretty awesome to see the beginnings of that. I mean, I've attended Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, after Chuck had passed in 2013, but to see these are the grounds of which people were coming in, 40, 50 years ago, and their lives were being changed. So that was really cool to just see all those stories kind of come to life, and to know that without that movement, my parents probably aren't saved. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I don't know that for sure, but it wouldn't have been in the way that it did happen, and that they both got plugged into Calvary Chapel churches. That's where they were cared for. That's where their needs were met. That's where they built community. And so I thought that was super awesome to see.
What was it like for you, Erika, watching this movie and seeing this movement unfold, and any connection for you and your story?
It's funny because my grandparents lived in San Francisco in the 70s, and my grandpa was in the Army, so they were stationed on the base in the Presidio, and I always kind of knew there was this just stories of your grandparents, and my grandpa would say oh yeah, we had this Bible study for hippies when we were there. And to kind of then hear it even a few weeks ago, in light of this movie, because they were able to preview this movie in the fall, but I didn't ever recognize the connection of this movement with that Bible study that they had, and to hear the full story of they were attending this church, and a group of hippies came in the church and was we want to learn the Bible. Can someone teach us what's in here? And the elders went to my grandpa. He studied the Bible. He went to seminary, and they're can you teach them? Wow. And he was sure. And so they met in my grandparents' home, and my grandma was saying irony of so against war, and they were meeting in at the Army base in wow, in my grandparents' home. And my grandma's even saying toward the end of the story of the group grew and grew, and she's there was these dirty hippies in my home, and they would bring sand in, and they were barefoot, and she's I remember going to your grandpa and being they're making my home dirty, and my grandpa telling her what's more important, things or that they know the Bible. And she was you're right. You're right. Okay. I get that. So, but even to hear this small thing that, I always knew that they had this, and kind of hearing these funny stories. And my grandma's very traditional, very classic grandma, has always been classic grandma. And to kind of hear the influence of, even as she says now, these dirty hippies without shoes coming into her home, and to understand the larger picture that was happening in that area. So yeah, it was cool to get that perspective.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's super cool.
Yeah,
I don't have a direct relation, but it's been neat. I grew up living in Southern California, just up the 57 freeway from Angel Stadium. Every summer was Harvest Crusade, which Greg Laurie and his church would put on. And so I always got to go to those, and those were formational, and just even I think my growth of just, hey, I was going to Christian concerts and hearing the word. I mean, there's kids in my youth group that would, I remember a few of them over the course of the years got saved from that stuff. So it was just super cool to even be a part of that kind of future element that, of the efforts that we see shown in the Jesus Revolution movie, to Greg Laurie starting his church and starting his ministry and his zeal for evangelism, to filling out Angel stadiums, and then just even getting experience of that. But even on a smaller thing, I thought was really neat. I have my mom's I think my mom's maybe first Bible, or it's her student Bible, and I was even just looking at through that briefly, and it's kind of contextualized, a little bit more groovy.
Okay.
You know, and I don't think it's, you know, directly from, you know, but it is from early 70s. There's like a little, I think one of her leaders gave it to her is, I think 1971 or 72. But you can just kind of see like, hey, there was this growing zeal for evangelism, ministry, the gospel, and, you know, more and more people know about Jesus. And then you even see in the student Bible that kind of similar contextualization, like,
That
hey,
influence.
that influence and everything. And so that was kind of neat to even just see as my mom was, you know, growing in her own faith, she was around, you know, that kind of same experience and stuff. So it's been kind of cool to think about, like, how, I mean, all three of us have been impacted some way, you know, pretty much directly through this. So it's been cool. All right, as we wrap up, want to know your guys' final thoughts on the movie and your final rating. So we'll do the movie star rating out of 5 stars. So let's give it a star rating and kind of even just your final few words towards this. Bryce, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna give it a 4.5 stars here.
Stars.
Yeah,
good.
4.5 stars. I thought the production was excellent. I would give it 5 stars, but I thought the way it kind of like ended and the way it like kind of wrapped up at the end, it felt a bit rushed.
Yeah.
That's my only critique. So you get a half star off for that, but great production, great story. 4.5 stars for me. And you said like final thoughts on it, or
sure, yeah. I mean, any other just final parting words just for the listener, maybe a final encouragement. Here's why they should watch it.
Oh, okay. It's a good story, guys. Like, I don't know what like it's a great story.
Yeah.
If you love to hear a good story and you love a little bit of history, I mean, we're here in Southern California, and you know, like all three of us were impacted by it. You know, maybe you were too, and so that's my encouragement to you guys is, you know, go check it out. I think we should, you know, as I've said on this, you know, podcast already, we should be wanting to support Christian creators,
absolutely.
and so you know, go ahead and rent it or buy it even on your what is it, on Apple, Amazon. You can probably get it anywhere. Yeah, you can get it anywhere at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are my final thoughts.
Yeah, I give it a 4, and I like a really strong 4. And the only reason why is just because I want to believe that there's room for Christian movies to get better. So I'm reserving that. I really love this. Like I said, I've watched it twice. I was still really, you know, captured by it and everything. Really was just tuned in and focused. So yeah, similarly, man, I was gonna say the same thing. I know there's the trope of like, we're Christians, we should support Christian media. While that's exhausting, I think it is true. I think it's
exhausting.
I mean, like, you know, looking at those old cheesier films that I love. But it's true. I mean, I think it goes a long way to show and our support to the need for this and more good, clean entertainment with a gospel story. So
yeah, I think I'm gonna give it a 4. And I thought about like 3.8, but it's like, no. So the reason I give it a 4 is because the opening scene is this kind of like peek into what's going to happen, and then they throw it back a year before. And when we finally reached that scene in the movie, it felt like, oh, we're going to wrap up soon. But then it was kind of this like, okay, and then there's, and then, okay. And then, so it was almost like, I wish that scene was a little bit further toward the end of the movie. Like that was really, it was very much a crux, like a high point of the movie, but it almost felt like then there was too much after that scene. So that's my reason of like, the movie was fantastic. I thought the production, all of that stuff was great. The dialogue, even like, I think you can really tell the quality of a movie by the pauses, and the pauses were very intentional. But that was the one thing I'm like, oh, I feel like I was following it and I felt the flow of the movie until that point, and then it was like
kind of
I had to catch up.
A false ending.
A false ending. Yeah. So
Okay.
solid.
That's very fair.
Iffy 4.
Yeah.
But definitely worth watching.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. It was fun chatting with you guys about
Yeah.
this. I'm sure I'll watch it again soon. Foothill, if you haven't watched it, watch it. If you have, watch it again. Tell your friends about it. Well, hey, thanks for tuning in. A little bit longer of an episode than normal, but hope you kind of got some good out of it. We will see you in a couple more weeks. Bye.
See you guys.
I got the Bluey theme song stuck in my head.
Mom.